5, 4, 3. CGP Video Pictures presents Trek Tonight Season 2. This week, Strange New Worlds. With your hosts, Christopher Pitcher, Leo Byrne-Janicek, and Keith Jacobson. Tonight's review, Charades. Now live from New York City, Wilmington, Delaware, and Everett, Washington, it's Trek Tonight. Hey there, Trekkers, and welcome back to another episode of Trek Tonight. We are here again to talk about Strange New Worlds. We had what I thought was a really fun episode, but if you haven't seen it, we are going to be giving out spoilers, so just know that. And if you haven't seen it, go stream it, come back and watch the playback. How you doing, guys?
I feel as though I'm broadcasting from planet Vulcan today. It is brutally hot here in New York.
Yeah.
Not a dry heat like Vulcan. It is humid. So reminds me of the summers of my childhood.
Yes.
So, but nothing, no inclement weather will keep me from jabbering about my favorite show.
Would you really say that, Leo? Would you say it's your favorite show?
Star Trek is easily one of my. I should say one of my favorite shows because it's got much like a parent. I don't think I could choose because there's a lot of shows I like, but we're also getting a wonderful 10-episode run of what is I'm going to say is my favorite of the new live action shows.
Yes,
like consistently.
Yes.
And I will, as much as I like Prodigy, and hopefully, we're going to get more of that.
Right.
Lower Decks delights me because it fuses two of my favorite things, Star Trek and comedy. So,
yeah. Feels like forever since that's been on.
Yeah, it was last year. It was and CBS has not, or Paramount Plus has not dropped a date yet for its return. Sometime might be next month or September, or could even be October. It's unclear.
Right. Hey, Craig Lubin is here, and he says he's got a question. He thought the Orville was Leo Janicek's favorite show.
I will find you, Lubin. As Fox said in his episode, I will break you.
You will chase him round the moons of Nibia. And...
His maelstrom.
I'm just gonna go get another beverage and just listen to Leo talk about his effusive love for Orville, because that's a show all in itself.
Yeah,
that's the Red Band show.
Hey Keith, you must have been excited because tea preparation was a part of this episode.
It was a part of this episode. I would really love to taste that tea and see what it's like. I, however, am not a Vulcan and will never pretend to be a Vulcan. Well, I might pretend to be a Vulcan someday, but I will still wear mitts when holding that teapot.
Yes. There was. Overall, I would say it was a delightful episode. It was a comedy. It was kind of a romantic comedy, although there was a serious plot involved, but there were hijinks.
Yes,
and
definite Vulcan hijinks, no question.
And I think somehow having Vulcans sort of caught up in something like this is maybe even funnier because of the juxtaposition of Vulcan stoicism.
To me, it's better than Worf hijinks, and Worf hijinks were pretty good.
Yeah,
I like, just like you said, because you think of Vulcans as so serious. and it's great to see them get to be able to play in a kind of ridiculous situation.
And I will also say, sorry to interrupt you, Keith.
No. Go ahead.
Is that, because Vulcans control their emotions, but you can see amongst Vulcans when they react, they're not hugely demonstrative in their emotions, but you can tell like this one's pissed off, this one's amused, this one, it's like it's very subtle, because in an actor, if you're just completely robotic,
right,
it's very dull to play and very dull to watch.
Well, I mean, let's look at T'Pring's family.
Oh, yeah.
You could read how annoyed the mother was from three light years away. She was. Yeah.
And I just want to say that I think they missed an opportunity in this show. I would have paid real money to watch T'Pring's parents play real charades. I mean, the game was described to them, but we never actually got to see them playing charades. And I think
secret words.
Yeah.
What I loved about that dynamic is I loved how the father really was open to all sorts of things, and the wife just shut him down all the time. And then he was so cowed by that he just went, "Oh yeah, you're right. It's too salty."
I noticed this thing that you mentioned that I previously said nothing about. You getting a message? Okay.
So,
but yeah, some critics had a problem with it. They felt like it was like kind of the henpecked husband and sort of shrewish wife trope. But right. I liked her dad. T'Pring's dad seems pretty cool.
He does,
and he was open. He was open to any suggestion. He was like, okay, let's, he
liked Pike's food.
Yeah,
until he was told not to.
Yes.
Hey, Craig also says Vulcan and Klingon rituals all seem to involve an uncomfortable amount of pain and silent suffering.
Yes. You're not wrong.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
Well, let's sort of get to this. In the beginning, Spock is trying to sort of get himself like focused, and they're in the system where planet Vulcan is, and they're going to investigate a planet that has ruins of a long lost or long disappeared civilization.
Right.
And there's a sort of a weird reading on the moon, so they're going to check it out. And they're also traveling at sub-impulse speed, which, as far as I could tell, means they're not moving at all. But
I think it just meant. I think the idea was supposed to be that they're just sort of farting along on thrusters.
They're not. Yeah. And Chapel is preparing. She's applying for this archaeological medical fellowship. There she is on Vulcan.
Damn, that's a beautiful shot of her.
And Spock is like, everybody's sort of enjoying their downtime.
I love this bit with. I love this bit with in the beginning with Pike and Spock, because he wants to learn more about cooking, and Pike is trying to teach him to cook, and he can't enjoy the smells because they have nasal inhibitors, so they don't have to smell the humans.
All I saw in that picture was the steak on the grill in the foreground. That's all I saw.
Yeah, look at that.
That's a nice tomahawk there. Good.
Oh my
God, I want that
isn't
thing.
it? And there's the bacon.
There's the bacon. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that Vulcans find the smell of humans unappealing was established back in Enterprise.
Yes.
T'Pol made a comment about using nasal inhibitors. Since Vulcan senses are heightened, especially for females, which later on T'Pring's mother comments on.
Right.
So everybody's right. There's a scene where Spock is sitting in, I'm going to call it 10 forward, although they have not established a name for this sort of bar lounge, sort of cafe section of the ship. and Ortegas is telling a funny story. She's laughing, Uhura's laughing, Lahan's laughing, Una's laughing.
This picture is actually after he's human, but
after he's human,
yeah,
but
same scene basically.
Yeah,
yeah.
And he's like, "Huh, I see." Which only makes them laugh harder because he's,
Right.
telling a joke to a Vulcan is like throwing rocks in the ocean. Your rate of return is going to be very low. But there's a lot of nice little moments. There was even though it was heavily featured Spock in Chapel, I think everybody got little moments in this episode, which I thought was terrific.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Scott Taylor's here. He gives us a thumbs up.
Hi, Scott.
Yeah.
Good to see you. I just I really enjoyed the whole story. And what was that? There was something I was going to say, Keith. While I'm thinking about it, what were your first impressions on the episode?
My first impressions was one, I loved it, and I thought the second half was especially funny. Once we got to the engagement dinner, whatever you call that, whatever
Right.
the name for that ritual was. Once we got to the ritual dinner and T'Pring's parents come on board, I thought that's when the show kind of really picked up pace and hit its stride. And again, I just love watching Ethan Peck, and I'm sorry I keep forgetting the name of the actress who plays T'Pring. But
Jess Bush. Oh no,
Spring. I don't remember her name, unfortunately.
I'm going to make an effort to memorize that.
Yeah, terrific. But Gia is her first name.
I will say I was discussing this with someone else earlier today. When it comes to, don't get me wrong, I love all of the female characters on the show, but I think that Jess Bush is probably one of the best actresses on the show right now. It's not that I love Ortega; she's a favorite character of mine, but Chapel just has so many different dimensions going on.
Yeah,
when you're watching her performance, and I just really tip my hat to her. I think she's doing a great job.
She's amazing, and the actress who plays T'Pring, though, I think is doing an amazing job playing all the subtle ways that she's annoyed and angry and hurt at the various situations.
Yes,
that she gets put in. I think she's doing a fantastic job, and I want to see more work from her in other contexts.
Yeah, well, you may or you may not for a little while.
Well, not for a while, I know.
You're taking a break. But I did think it was especially funny because she's usually so much about all the Vulcan ritual, and she steps off the transporter. Poor Spock is trying to be Vulcan, and he's saying, parted, doing the whole parted, not parted thing. Mm. And she's like, please, I've had enough of that,
I've had enough formality. There were a lot of wonderful moments. Obviously, sort of buried the lead is Chapel and Spock go on this mission onto the moon. They crash into this vortex, and Spock wakes up in sickbay, and they're like, "Well, there was an accident, and Nurse Chapel's fine. You were hurt. There's that shot, and
there's the shot of that Pike and M'Benga and Chapel all leaning over Spock, staring at him from his point of view. I love that.
Yeah,
we got good news and we got bad news.
Yeah, that he's fine, but now he's fully human, and we almost had another. He's like, "What the?" And they cut to
what the F? What that's what it said on the closed captioning.
Yeah, and he, so Spock is now fully human. He's, he's flipping out, but all his emotions are so on the surface. And
I loved the fact that they because La'an is the one who puts it in these terms, but they described it like adolescence.
Yeah.
That because it's in human being, that's where you're really starting to grapple with all of your emotions and your body and your senses and all of that stuff. And I loved that. Very amusing little moment where he clearly is sitting there and looking at her, and then all of a sudden gets a little excited, and he says, "Now I'm embarrassed."
Yeah. And it's just basically like being angry and sad and confused and hungry, Is it? Yeah, I know. Is it, so many snacks, you know, and she's like, well, you just need to work on your self control,
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, why did they have her talk to him? But it makes sense because she is amongst the crew sort of the one who has the most of like that Vulcan quality of sort of getting her emotions under control. She's usually very, very reserved.
Well, that's sort of what the episode with Kirk was about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they were trying to teach him how to be Vulcan again, because he has to go to, there's this engagement dinner which they keep pushing off, and it has to happen.
Right.
It's like how he needs to talk like a Vulcan, and Uhura's like, speak like a robot with no inflection, and they all say stuff, and then Ortega's perfectly puts it says, and you use no muscles in your face except your eyebrows. And
you move. You're right. You move your eyebrow, but no other muscle in your face.
And they're all like, yes, that's it. And he goes, is that what I sound like? And they're all like, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Which was a lovely little moment, and he's sort of gone back on duty. Despite Pike has little misgivings. He's like, I don't know if this was a mistake. But he's learning to cook with Pike. He says, well, the reason you beat the eggs is to get more air in them. He said, well, what's that amazing smell? He said, oh, that's the bacon. And he tries it. He was like, oh, my God. Like,
no, it's salty and sweet and crispy and soft all at the same time.
Yeah. And he just starts shoving bacon into his mouth, which was one, who could blame him? Now, it has been, I don't know where it was established. Well, actually, I do know it was established that Vulcans are vegetarians.
Right.
That was in the Return of the Archon, not the Return of the Archon, the one where Spock and McCoy get sent back to the Ice Age on that planet.
Yes.
Mr.
Right.
Atos. And he's with the.
Is that all our yesterdays? No.
All our yesterdays was the. Anyway. If anybody watching can fill that in while we're talking, but he's like, Spock is sort of reverting to like ancient Vulcan sort of ways because he's displaced in time, which again is debatable, the logic, but let's just go with it. And I've eaten the flesh of beasts or something to that effect. But I guess human Spock is like, bacon is delicious and I want to eat all the time now. And then he makes himself sick.
Gina says that was one of her favorite scenes.
Yeah, I love that.
And I love it. He's so Pike is there like, maybe you better slow down a little bit. And he goes, oh, well, I'm making up for lost time. And then why do I feel nauseous?
Yeah. So, and then, he's at the bar and Ortega tells another joke and they're all laughing. And he starts laughing like way too long. And it's all awkward. And everybody starts to be like, and then he downs his drink in one go. He says, I was thirsty from the laughing or something to that effect. Yeah.
As pubescent Spock is awesome.
Yeah,
but you know what? It was also funny and odd, and I didn't really get where it came from. Why was Spock so OCD about Sam Kirk and his crumbs on the table?
In the beginning of the episode, you see him, and he's got like his table, like his cup and his saucer sort of near the edge of the table, which bothers his sort of OCD, that sort of Vulcan sense of order. And they notice the crumbs, and also delighted to see Sam Kirk back.
I was glad to see him back. I thought he was off the show,
and he's having a very serious conversation about this phenomenon that they're exploring.
Yeah. And
when he's back, when he's human Spock, he's like, Sam Kirk, please clean up your mess. And he's like, are you serious? He was like, very. He's like, all right. Yeah. And then they cut back because they're cutting back and forth through these scenes.
Kirk, and I will break you.
I will break you. And two other science officers are holding him. He's like, all right, I'll clean up.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun. And hats off to the actor who plays Sam Kirk. Got a lot of mileage out of essentially two very short scenes.
I liked the way, from a critical standpoint, and part of it's because I'm doing a lot of editing at the moment on another project, but I liked the way they had those three plots or three activities. The group hanging out in the bar, Pike and him cooking, and the business with Kirk giving the report in the briefing room, and how they kept jumping back and forth between the different scenes. So you got a little bit building in each one as it rotated through. I thought that was kind of cool.
It was. I liked the way they edited that, and I loved, like, he's don't test me, Kirk.
Craig says, "Don't test me, Kirk."
It's terrific. And Chapel, who has her interview with this Vulcan Science Academy guy, and
man, what a douchebag!
What a jerk! And this guy's being so mean to her, and
so full of himself, and so mean to her.
Because she's like, your proposal like deviated from the text. She's like, well, I didn't want to just regurgitate the words. I wanted, and he's like, I find nothing unique or new. And so, well, I thought my field work. He says, well, I will glance at it. Right. That is all. She says, well, that's it. She's like, I have everything I need, and he signs off. And they get this shot of her standing from the screen. It's kind of sad, and she goes off and she runs into Spock, who's like, are you okay? And she says, yeah, I didn't really, and he finds, is it the science? He says, Vulcans can be jerks.
Yeah, I love that.
And she smiles, and he's like, puts his arms out, and he hugs her. And at first she's like, because Spock is not a hugger, generally speaking. Right. And so I don't know if I misread this moment. And she's, no, it was nice. And they have like a nice little rapport. And she says, well, how the feelings going? He says, it's a lot. He says, sometimes I don't always cry in the shower. He goes, I'm kidding. And,
I love that. He threw out his first joke. I thought that was fantastic.
And then he's called to the transporter room by Captain Pike. Is it an emergency? So your mom is beaming on board. And there she is.
What a great dress, man.
It is. The costumes on this show are outstanding.
Yeah.
She is a terrific Amanda. She has a lot of the female characters back in the real series were there in service of male characters. Nurse Chapel was especially, as was Amanda Grayson.
Yeah.
But I think she does a great job. And then Spock comes in wearing this beanie, this sort of knit.
I wish I had been able to find a picture of that beanie. Keith, I knew you were working today, but I almost wrote to you and said, screen grab me a picture of that beanie.
Well, it's sort of not, because Spock has worn a beanie on at least one occasion in the original series to hide his Vulcan ears. And he did this, of course, the opposite. And he's talking with his mom, and he's acting all weird. And she's like, come here, take off your hat. And he does. And she's like, Spock, you're human. He goes, hi, Mom.
I just want to say right there, I really liked that little moment there where Amanda, she just like puts on the mom voice. She just goes, Spock, take off your hat.
Yeah.
Just like, it's like, the kind of mom voice, that anyone who has had a mom, which is, most of us, it just goes, there's no argument with that. There's no way you can argue against that. You don't want to.
Like, hi, Mom. Yeah. But what was great was before that, where she realizes that there's something really wrong with him, he really does go into a real adolescent rant.
Yeah.
Well, I just had an accident, and I shouldn't be having this dinner. It's just too much, and blah 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 blah. And it was such a teenage response.
Oh yeah.
It was great.
And then when they're discussing matters in the captain's quarters, and Spock is in the foreground, just like eating something. Like it looked like maybe a bowl of grapes or whatever alien stuff. He's just like down in it, sort of like stress eating. And she's like, well, listen, I've neglected part of your human heritage. I'm going to teach you how to lie. He says, you think I can do this? Yes, with the captain's help. And Pike goes, do I have a choice in the matter? She's like, no, Captain, you don't.
Yeah, right.
Moms outrank captains.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved the way Pike was trying to help him out in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like let's go back to the hat. And he's saying, why are you wearing that hat? Well, it's regulation. And Pike's like, oh yeah, I've got one.
Yeah.
And he keeps trying to help him out, and it's like it's not working. But I'm not sure quite what Barbara Pitcher is asking of it. She says the scene with the mom was nicely done, but she also asked about Spock's ears.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, I thought it was especially funny when they bring him the prosthetic application.
Yeah,
because it made me wonder: is that the actual application?
It's got to be. I bet it
I
is.
would imagine so.
Yeah, I thought.
And he picks up and it's sort of wobbly, and is like, you know, and they do explain why they didn't like do an injection like they did in the very first episode to make him.
And I was thinking about that.
But he says it might interfere with your cure. Which,
speaking of which, let's jump back a tiny bit to when Alon and who was it with La'an when they were looking at the shuttle when they get first?
It was Una.
Una. Okay. So, and they find that little ring disc.
Right.
That's a calling card for the aliens. And they end up Uhura realizes that they can communicate with them. And so she does. Pike starts to talk to him. He's like, first contact,
Yeah.
But it's basically like they're talking to Siri.
Yeah.
Or they're talking to Alexa. It's like, and I loved that. It's like, this is an alien call center.
It reminded me of, I don't know if I've had this experience a couple of times recently where like you want customer service and you're like online.
Right.
And they say, well, you can text with us.
Yeah.
And they're not really people. These are bots doing this. And it's just like,
hi, I'm Jerry. How can I help you? Yeah.
Jerry, are you human?
Yeah. I'm yellow.
And they're like,
yellow and blue.
Yeah. Was it remediations have been made because, they felt responsible for the shuttle crashing. So they fixed the shuttle and they fixed Spock. But because Spock in Chapel didn't match, they matched him to her. And also, or maybe the idea that he was half human, they didn't understand that that's the way he was supposed to be. So they thought, we'll fix him. And
and an interesting little nod to the Telosians in a way, because now it wasn't as bad. Obviously, they sort of knew more what they were doing because they had another example. Yeah. But it's like what happened to Vina.
Yeah, that's
the only human being left, and they didn't really know how to fix her. So they did the best they could.
Yeah, okay, then you brought it up. But it still seems to me that because we see we're now talking about a whole different episode, but the Telosians are symmetrical beings. They got two shoulders, two arms, with more or less straight backs.
Yeah.
And somehow they thought this misshapen Vina is what she was supposed to look like.
Yeah, I know. That's really kind of odd. I agree.
I just thought of that myself. I'm like, it sounds like you really didn't put in a lot of effort there, Telosians.
No, not a lot of thought into it, Telosians. Yeah.
But it was like it was alien customer service, and it was also like many customer service calls, unsatisfying.
Yes.
But also, here's a little note when there are the three tenants, and I have a note on this that people are grilling Christine Chapel on before her interview. It's Corby's 3 principles of archaeological medicine.
I noticed that.
Yes, a reference to Roger Corby, who will at some time in the future become Chapel's fiance.
Right.
Unless it had happened earlier than this, but she doesn't react in any way. But we'll see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I love that little note, that little sort of nod to canon. This could easily be a canon breaking episode, and I suppose it is. So
Telosians are lazy genetic engineers.
Well, I guess when you got mental powers, you sort of like let everything else slide.
Yeah.
You're like, well, we can just make her feel like she's pretty. I think for a late 1960s audience, they had never seen a human, and like, you have mirrors, and you guys are basically bipedal. So
right.
It wasn't like they made her all like tall and skinny and give her a big like bulbous head.
Right, which they could have done, I guess.
As opposed to like making her look like Lady Quasimodo.
Yeah.
So
it was supposed to have that Twilight Zone ending.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really
there was that element to it.
Yeah.
But
meanwhile, back to this show.
Break the glasses.
Back to this show. When she decides, Chapel is just trying to find a cure, and she's like, nothing is working. And Mbenga rightly points out that this was done by like transdimensional beings whose medicine is so far beyond anything we've even imagined. Yeah. So maybe that's why they were able to do it, and you're having trouble. And that's the idea. So she goes and talks to Uhura and Ortegas, and it's like, basically, I want to take a shuttle in and communicate with them. If we get close enough, we can communicate with them. There's like, well, it's a tunnel, so it'll basically be empty, which Ortegas is kind of like, I was like, all right, we'll do it. And they're eating lunch at the time, I presume lunch. They're eating sandwiches, and they're like, can we get these to go? So they hop on the shuttle to go and do this.
Excuse me, by the way, I just want to say right then and there, I love the fact that the Enterprise has a to-go restaurant. That's just a freaking amazing, I think.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes somebody might be like, that seems to be like a social gathering spot. I don't know if it is considered the galley, because it seems more like a social hub, where you can get food and drink.
They haven't really. You are right, Leo. Unlike things like Next Gen and other series after that, they haven't really established. We've seen them, and they're beautiful, and they've done great jobs with them. But they haven't really established like other shows did, where this is 10 Forward, this is Quark's Bar. People just sort of show up in them and use them, and but the bar is very cool.
It's very cool. I love the bar. I would totally hang out at that bar.
Yeah.
Looks like they make good sandwiches too. That burger that Ortegas was chomping into, I'm like, I'll have what she's having. I liked it. I thought it was, and so meanwhile, they, while she's going to do that, and they're all on the shuttle, they have to do this engagement ceremony, and part of it is they have to make family tea, and Spock, his mom is showing him. He's like, well, that sounds easy. He's like, well, you basically have to pick up this super hot Vulcan teapot and pour the water precisely with your bare hands. That's scalding. He says, well, Vulcan wouldn't feel any pain. Right. And she does it, proving that she's spent enough time on Vulcan that she can she can play with the big boys, so to speak. And I really liked Amanda in this episode. She was a good mom, and but also was calling people out on their nonsense. When Spock was preparing for this dinner, everybody's giving him all this advice. They're like, because he has to do a mind meld with his mother at one point. He says, I can't fake it. I'm used to seeing the memories. I can't see the memories. How am I supposed to fake it? He's like having this like meltdown, and like Una very unhelpfully says, "You look like you're constipated."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so they and before T'Pring beams aboard, he's like, I don't know if this is going to work. They've got him in a traditional Vulcan outfit, and he's got the fake ears and the whole thing. And
this one,
a very cool looking outfit. And he says, "Mom, is this going to work?" He says, "Everything will work out." So you're sure? She's like, "I'm positive." Which is not based on, I think, on any like logic that this is, that this is a foolproof plan. But as his mom, she has to say it's all going to work out, because otherwise, if he says, "I don't know," he'll probably have a meltdown.
Right.
But T'Pring comes on, and she's like, "I don't know more formality," because he's like, "Parted and never parted." She's like, No.
Yeah.
Wearing also this beautiful dress.
Oh my God, her gown is gorgeous. Yeah.
Vulcan fashion is, the
And I love the fact that her mother bullied her into wearing it.
Yeah. And it is actually more modest than she. I mean, not that she dresses in like a necessarily provocative outfit, but her other outfits are a little sexier. I mean, this was beautiful, but it was a little more demure. There's the mom.
The costumes for her parents were great.
Oh yeah, her mom's costume was great. That crazy collar.
The huge collar. Yeah.
And I love her dad. Her dad is very like go with the flow. He's the most easygoing Vulcan we've ever met.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're doing
it's funny too because he's the second bald or third bald Vulcan that I've seen.
You know, you got to figure male pattern baldness exists in all species. So.
Yeah, and it's nice because there was a while where it was like there's only one haircut on Vulcan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not talking about this show. I'm talking about previous shows.
Yeah.
It's like every Vulcan had the same damn bowl cut. And yeah, so it's nice, I think.
I like it. And Pike is there in his green wraparound hosting, and he stayed up all night cooking all these Vulcan delicacies. Yeah. And he brings a plate of them, and the father takes one. He's like, "Oh, I forgot the name of the hors d'oeuvre," and he takes it. Oh, this is delicious. You made this yourself? And, oh, very good. And the wife is like, "Well, no, because there's like what looks like a curly chip stuck inside I'm gonna say an alien kiwi fruit of some kind. I don't know. It was weird. Like it looked delicious, but it was like nothing right. And she says, "Well, the twirl is not traditional, and it's too fancy, basically, And there's salt." He says, "Well, I had to use that, to adjust for the different temperatures between the ship and Vulcan." And and Amanda's like, "Oh, what a clever, like improvisation." And she's like,
yeah.
And maybe you need
also
more practice.
Making, snide comments about the smell of humans, because she's,
I must say, I mean, we've seen a lot of Vulcans over the time, and with a handful of exceptions like Spock and T'Pring's dad, as a rule, Vulcans seem to be kind of pricks.
Some of them are. It is, I guess what happens when you suppress your emotions, it tends to sort of come out in other areas.
You become passive.
Well, let's think about how they portrayed them in the first season of Enterprise.
Yeah.
Where, it was definitely
pseudo antagonist.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it was very clear they were trying to. Isn't that interesting when you think about it? It was very clear that the Vulcans were trying to sort of hold Earth back from going out into space in a big way, and yet that's what the Romulans were trying to do too.
Yeah.
I think what is sort of interesting is I have a different sort of take on it in that the Vulcans were aware of how dangerous the galaxy was, and they didn't, and Vulcans tend to be very conservative for the most part. So, they assumed that humans were not ready for it, and they weren't. They're not wrong because they got into trouble.
Right.
It wasn't a complete disaster, but there were a number of times that human ignorance and sort of like, well, this will all work out, sort of blows up in their face.
Yeah.
So it's, I think that the Vulcans are a very, very conservative people, understandably so, given their history.
Right.
But, I would imagine Vulcans, like any species, they're humans who are cool and humans who are pricks.
Right.
So, the guy who was, giving Nurse Chapel such a hard time, obviously, he's got, some issues, that he's working on or not working on perhaps. But there is a certain prejudice. And sort of going back to the Vulcan prejudice, they go through the whole ceremony. But before that, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself.
Oh, wait. I just wanted to put this picture up. You were talking about Pike preparing the food, and somehow or other this image didn't end up in my download, so I went back and got it. But here he is.
There's that plate of hors d'oeuvres.
It's different tunic, isn't it? It's darker.
It's a little darker. Yeah, it might have been the lighting though. But
I love that tunic. Damn.
I do love that tunic, and it's a little more formal, which was nice. Not full dress, but like duty dress. I don't know. I don't know if there's a name for it, but he decided to put on a little bit of a spit and polish for his friend or his friend's family.
Right.
So, Uhura and Ortegas and Chapel go, and they decide we have to go inside the vortex to communicate. And Uhura's like, yeah, we're going to do it. And even though Chapel says, I don't want to ask you guys to risk your lives on doing it. And then they're looking at Ortegas, and Ortegas is like, you actually think I'm going to be the one who's going to say no to the crazy stunt? Then all right, I'm in. So they go in there, and they end up in this weird, surreal, light room comprised of lights and like with this mirrored floor. They did that with the I'm going to call it the volume, although it might be technically a different thing. Apparently, they shot that months after they shot the episode because of scheduling reasons, and because there was nothing really to focus on because everything was changing. It just made them all very nauseous after a while. And they were in there for like 8 hours or something crazy like that.
You're muted, Chris.
You're muted.
You're still muted, Chris.
You're muted. We can't hear you.
Chris, listen to us. You're muted. Huh. He's still muted. Well.
Yes, I was. I left it muted.
Yes.
Anyway, when you're done with that point, I want to talk about the AR screens because they're very cool.
Yeah. So they go there and they're waiting for somebody, and then one of these aliens says, "Oh, you yellow." I am blue. Same voice. No way to distinguish between the two for humans. And she's basically saying, like, we want to, the thing about Spock, they were, remediation was done. And they're like, the time for basically like filing a complaint is expired. For French, she's like, well, why? And he said, well, I want to talk to Yellow. And there they bring Yellow back and all this stuff. And they basically were like, why can't a French play? She said, well, French aren't close enough to be able to, to be impacted or to have that connection. And both Ortegas and Chap or her were like, tell them what's going on. She's like, I don't know what you mean. He's like, if you don't, he's not going to change. She basically doesn't quite confess to her love, but or she doesn't do it on screen, but she must do something because they do give her the cure, and she shows up just before Spock has to have his mind meld, and Pike is trying to delay things, and hence we got the title. It says there's a human tradition called charades, and they're like, well, what is this thing? He says, well, they're teams, and each team is given a word, and T'Pring's dad says a sacred word, and Pike is like, sure. So if you break it down in syllables, so if you want to say, first of all, he tugs on his ear, he says, that sounds like ear, and you're like, okay, and Keith had said it before the show, was like, I would, or maybe you said it during the show, it's like, I would have loved to have seen them play a round of charades, because that would have been hilarious. There wasn't enough time, but I would have liked to have seen it. That may be a cut scene that might end up in deleted scenes.
Oh God, I want to see that scene so much. If they put this thing on DVDs and Blu-rays, I will buy it just for that scene. Because I want to say it's a bit of a tease to name the episode Charades, to bring up charades in that context, and then to not show us. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a tease.
To be fair, charade, like the idea of a charade being like a deception or like a trick. If it is pronounced charade, it is one of Picard's favorite words.
Yes.
Says, I've had enough of your charade. It was my terrible Patrick Stewart impersonation.
And I thought that until Pike brought up. I thought that's where they were going with this until
But I
Pike
think it has
actually said charades, and I'm going, oh, great, we're going to get to see them play charades. I'm all in for this.
I was all in for that too, but I would say it had multiple meanings.
Sure.
You wanted to talk about the screen, Chris, before we go on.
I was just and it's because of an interview with Anson Mount on the Ready Room, but I really learned how the AR screens work.
Yeah,
and it's fascinating. I mean, those screens are wrapping around them, sometimes going up into the ceiling.
Yeah,
and when you step onto that set, you literally see the world around you. And you're talking about how amazing that is, except for the fact that when the camera pans, so does the screen behind you.
Yeah.
And he was saying you got to find something to focus on, otherwise you're
which is what Jeff Bush said in her interview, how because there was really nothing to focus on, that they were all getting like a little motion sickness.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that I would imagine that would be true in that instance. So, yeah.
But just before, because they have to do the mind meld in Spock. That is, I think, the thing that he's most worried about. They also have which I'm going to call the airing of grievances, where a prospective in-law gets to talk about all the things that's wrong with their
everything that's wrong with you.
Yeah, and Amanda, who is very gentle, goes to Pring, you could visit more often, and of course, T'Pring's mom has some snide remark about that, and they said, "Well, I also think you could be more confident." And the father's like, "Is that not what we've told her?" Which at least is, at least gentle. It's more gentle, than her mom. Her mom talks to Spock basically like, you are a failure because you're leaving my daughter for a month at a time. There are plenty of guys on Vulcan who would happily marry her, but you gallivant, you're pledging yourself to Starfleet first, and I understand why your father is basically disowned you. Like, I completely agree with that whole thing. It's super harsh, and she goes on and finally perhaps it says, the time of criticism is over, because they have like a little not an hourglass, because it only goes like a minute or something to that, a short period of time, and it's like the Nurse Chapel then shows up. They go off into the other room. Also, Spock also has a bit. He's like, I have to go to the restroom after that, after the airing of grievances, and he screams. He like freaks out. We remember that shot from the trailer. We had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, and I have to admit that freaking out bit. When I saw that in the trailer, I thought that was some sort of victory dance.
I did too.
I also didn't notice that he had human ears either.
I didn't notice that either, but
so he's like, ah, and he screams into a pillow and gets his shit together and goes back. But then Nurse Chapel shows up and she says, "Oh, Mr. Spock, I have your vitamins." He says, this is part of my treatment. So they go in the other room, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so glad," because he found out that that Chapel had gone off in the shuttle, and he was very worried about her, and he's very warm with her, and they're like, it's this sort of awkward thing where they're both almost confessing their feelings, but neither one. And he's about to say something, and she shoots him. It's basically like, your physical characters will return in a few hours, but you'll basically be Vulcan in every other way. And she does.
I was waiting for his fake ears to pop off, but
she said it will take a few hours for them to return.
There's one key thing I think we missed, and it's just kind of a small moment. But I think it's a big one. What?
I said, I don't know how we could have missed it.
Basically,
the entire episode.
Well, but there was one moment where when Chapel is talking to Yellow in the room, and describing her feelings for Spock. The Yellow goes, that explains why Spock focus the shields on you,
right,
to save your life and risk his own.
right.
So, and at the time Chapel is shooting him with the hypo, she now knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she says, "Why did you do that?" He goes, "Well, it's logical. As a Vulcan, I was more likely to be able to endure the damage." And she's like, she knows he's lying,
Right.
And it's a wonderful scene because both of them are so close to sort of confessing something to each other, but she shoots him before he could say anything that he might later regret.
Right.
And he goes back in the room, and he does the mind meld with his mom, and the memories of her dropping him off to school. And of course, T'Pring's mom is like, "Oh, what a banal memory," and T'Pring says, "It is not your place to judge the memory. It is your place to accept whether it is acceptable." And he passes everything. He does it. I mentioned before. He pours the tea, and he does it right. And he's like, his hands, of course, hurt. And then T'Pring takes his hand sort of under the table and squeezes it, and you watch him wince because it's still a little tender. Nice, lovely little moments. There were so many wonderful little moments in this whole episode. And basically, much like in a scene in the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek film, where Spock is accepted in the Vulcan Science Academy, and they're saying, like, despite your handicaps, we've allowed you to attend. And he goes, "Handicaps?" He says, "Well, yes, your human mother," all this stuff, which just sets him off. And he's like, basically, like, "I'm not going to go to the Vulcan Science Academy." No Vulcan has ever refused. He says, "As you point out, I am not fully Vulcan, so your record remains unblemished," which was basically a Vulcan way of saying, "Go fuck yourself."
Right.
And she's like, clearly a human could not have, like, she basically said, a human could not have gone through this ritual. He says, "Really, you're saying a human could not?" He says, "Yes, of course." And then he takes off the ears. He says, "Let me tell you that I was human." And he, which of course is a hugely shaming moment for her, and repudiation of his mom. And then in the next scene with T'Pring, she is justifiably annoyed that he did not tell her. And he's trying to explain why, because she's like, "Also, it seemed like everybody on your ship seemed to know your problem except for me. We've shared Katras. I've told you, I accept you, every part of you. And it hurts." Like, she doesn't say it hurts me, but that is the subtext. And she says, "I think we should take a break."
Right.
Which is hard for Spock because they went through all this to maintain this, and this love triangle is, it is essentially doomed because we sort of know what the future holds. But I can't help but feel badly for T'Pring because she puts up with a lot of nonsense from all this, and he didn't tell her because she was like stressed out about her mom.
Right.
And
it was sort of a legitimate reason, but it was kind of a human reason.
Yeah.
He was protecting her by omission.
Yeah.
Nobody was really wrong in that moment. She had every right to feel hurt. Spock, who was human at the time, he made the choice not to tell her, reacted in a human way.
Right.
Almost certainly the wrong way would have been better if he had brought her in on it. But in the moment, he made a human choice. That was the wrong choice. Didn't tell her. So I understand where everybody is coming from in this point, and it makes sense. It makes sense all the way around. It makes sense why T'Pring wants to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we don't need to feel too bad for. We don't need to feel too bad for Spock.
No.
I don't feel bad for him.
Having a little moment with Pike, giving another human tradition called commiseration, which is, I guess, basically sitting around and getting drunk. And so Spock is standing in his quarters, and the bell rings, and he goes up, and it's Chapel. And he says, "Well, I was coming to see you." He's like, "Oh, well, okay, well, here I am." And they go in, and she says, "Well, what did you want to tell me?" He says, "Well, T'Pring and I are taking a break." He says, "Well, how does that make you feel?" He says, "Well, I am sad." But basically saying, I feel emotion for you. I feel like I'm attracted to you. I love you. He doesn't say the words "I love you," but that is the subtext. and then she just starts kissing him, and he kisses her back, and she's like, basically, what does this mean? She's like, shut up. And it ends with them making out.
Right.
Now, it might be argued this is a canon-breaking moment. I thought it was terrific. I am not as married to canon as a lot of other fans are. I think that Chapel in the original series was underserved greatly, especially in relationship with her pining for Spock as the Miss Lonely Hearts. This Chapel has a lot more agency, exactly. So, with all due respect to Majel Barrett, who was, it was not her. That was the writer's choice, and women often got the short end of the stick in terms of dramatic arcs back in the 1960s.
Right.
So I'm all for it. How did you guys feel?
I loved this episode. I thought this episode was great. I loved I loved the spot. I loved the ritual that they were performing. I thought that was hilarious all the way. So many little things in there, which we've already mentioned on the fact Spock winces when T'Pring squeezes his hands and while he's facing the family with the teapot, he's got the stoic Vulcan face on, and the moment he turns around so his back is him, he's going, and he's wincing. But so I loved it. It was great. I loved the way T'Pring's portrayed. I love the way Spock was. Ethan Peck played Spock. I love Jeff Bush's Chapel. I want to see more about T'Pring's dad. I think Dad. I feel like Dad needs an episode. Do Vulcans get divorced?
I'm not sure what episodes we're going to get a T'Pring's dad episode. But maybe if they do a short trek, it feels like I'm going to guess that he has a man cave somewhere on their
probably.
Just the thought of a Vulcan with a man cave,
Yeah,
that is hilarious.
Yeah,
the idea he's like, my wife doesn't like when I eat this particular food, so I am going to logic would dictate that I whilst running errands, stop and enjoy it myself, and then vigorously brush my teeth before returning home. Because he seems very easygoing.
Yes.
And her mom seems like a lot of work. She's a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed them a lot. I thought they were great.
I love, again, talking about the costume, that great collar. The costumes were beautiful. I loved, like, it looked like everything was started before Spock is like, guess what, bitches? I'm human. It's like, because the father's like, do you have any more of those, of that, whatever that hors d'oeuvre is? And, Pike is very proud of his cooking, so he goes back and he comes in and he's walking in, and then Spock does the thing and he's just like, turns right around,
And I did like how Spock came to the defense of his mom. I thought that was outstanding.
The moment when this is the time he realized like how much she had sacrificed for marrying a Vulcan, and that the memory she tells us about dropping me off at school. It was the first day other Vulcan children asked Spock to play with them.
Yeah,
and she's like, the first time I saw you being accepted was the memory, like a cherished memory. I was like, that is so wonderfully compassionate, and like it seems like a minor thing, but it's big,
Right.
It's a big moment.
Yeah.
One of these small moments that are very important. And Mia Kirshner, who plays Amanda Grayson, is outstanding. She's great. It is mentioned that Peli is off getting dilithium. And so I assume that she, Amanda's she's picking up some antiquities too. And Pike is like, yeah, probably, hoping that it won't bring him any trouble.
I've never seen anybody so excited to buy dilithium.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I didn't forget that there was that connection.
Right.
I would like it if Amanda comes back later in the season.
She's got to come back. There has got to be, if not a full episode of Amanda and Pelia, there's at least going to be more we got to have some interactions between Amanda and Pelia.
Yeah, I agree.
From the sneak peek clip that we saw, it looks like next week's going to be very Pelia rich. So
yes.
Sure, all of you guys will enjoy that greatly.
That might be the episode you want to just maybe mute your mic as well. Leo and I talk about it.
Yeah, I'll probably just
Well, we'll see. My impression is we're going to get to see you more as a professional, as an engineer.
Maybe
that will win you over. It's funny because I know you said to us, not on the show, that she was your
my Dr. Pulaski. She's my Dr.
I'm not a fan of Dr. Pulaski, but that is based on her rather shabby treatment of Data.
Yeah. And it's a shame too, because that actress was so great in TOS.
Yeah, she had
two a couple times. So.
Yeah, she was in the episode with the Medusans. Is There No Truth in Beauty? And also the one with Sargon and I forget the name of that episode now.
Yeah.
Where they were going to build android bodies for themselves. They were like this lost civilization, and only 3 of them remained in these glowing globes. TOS got a lot of mileage out of very little. But she was Dr. Mulder, I believe, is the name of the character. And she was, a lovely actress. Back in the day, I just did not care for Pulaski. I think her sort of like again, it all came down to her called him Mr. Data.
I had a feeling they were trying to recapture some of the grumpy McCoy, but it just didn't play right.
It didn't really land, no. Because it's not like they ever even with McCoy's inexplicable racist outbursts, you still got the impression he gave a damn about Spock and was his friend.
Yes.
Versus Pulaski was just like, well, Data's just a machine, and she calls him Data. He goes, well, it's Data. What's the difference? Is one is my name and one is not, which was a great sick burn. So overall, I think we've covered everything, unless there's anybody has any other thoughts.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to roll us out of here then. We are a little bit over. That's all right. And we will be back next week for episode 6.
We're halfway done.
We're already over the hump. The midway.
I don't know that I feel so happy about that. That means the show's going to be done in 5 weeks.
I know.
I'm a little anxious about that, but I'm going to be, instead of being sad that it'll be gone when it's over, I'll be happy it happened.
Yeah.
And Dr. Seuss said.
All right, gang. Trying to figure out why it looks like that. There it is. Have a great week, everyone.